If you wonder why I am continuing to discuss HDG's denial of the Draupadi disrobing incident, I'll tell you why I think this issue needs to be discussed threadbare. If we do not have faith in Srila Prabhupada's books, if we think that on some basic point Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas are wrong and we need to correct them, it undermines the whole basis of our faith and our commitment in Krishna consciousness. Then we'll start to question everything and lose our inspiration to follow what's in the books and to distribute them. Disastrous. I've nothing personal against HDG, but his insisting on denying the Draupadi disrobing incident can only cause havoc in the spiritual lives of all those who follow him now and in the future, even if to them it's not obvious. This will be the mother of all kinds of deviations which now we cannot even imagine. Therefore, this issue needs to be addressed. So, continuing our discussion of HDG's denial of the attempted disrobing of Draupadi. A supporter of HDG wrote on his blog, and it was endorsed by HDG on his Facebook page, BVKS does not acknowledge the textual and manuscript history debate. If BVKS wants to challenge HDG's hermeneutics, he must engage with the manuscript tradition, the existence of various Mahabharata recensions, HDG's textual arguments. Actually, the argument that all the acharyas do support what HDG rejects in itself should be a strong enough position for any devotee to accept. But anyway, let's tackle this one also. Having previously addressed the point that all Vaishnava acharyas endorse the version that HDG denies, in this talk I will engage with the manuscript tradition. First of all, we should be clear that for devotees, the ultimate authority is not modern academia or manuscript studies, but Shastra as seen through the eyes of the acharyas. Relevant in this regard is a quote from Srila Prabhupada's purport to Sri Caitanya-caritamrta Madhya Lila chapter 8, text 193. Sometimes a university student or professor tries to study these transcendental literatures and attempts to put forth a critical analysis from the mundane view with an end to receiving degrees like a PhD. Such realization is certainly different from that of Ramananda Rai. If one actually wants to take a PhD degree from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and be approved by Ramananda Rai, he must first become free from all material designations, sarvopadhi vinir muktam tatparatvena nirmalam. Man-made religious scriptures and transcendental philosophical talks are quite different. Indeed, there is a gulf of difference between the two. This subject matter has been very diligently described by Srimad Madvacharya. Since material philosophers are situated in the material conception of life, they are unable to realize the spiritual prema vilasa vivarta. They cannot accommodate an elephant upon a dish. Similarly, mundane speculators cannot capture the spiritual elephant within their limited conception. So, what does this mean? Across the Vedic traditions, whether Vaishnav or non-Vaishnav, scholars traditionally did not place much emphasis on comparing manuscripts. Instead, they accepted the teachings as they were preserved and transmitted through the living Guru Parampara. Still, scholars such as HDG place faith on manuscript evidence and modern academic methodology, And many devotees today, being influenced, have come to place similar confidence in the academic method. In his Prameya Mani Mala commentary to Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay, Tamraparni Srinivasacharya mentions that the ultimate basis of Madvacharya's conclusions lies in his having received it from the omniscient Lord Vyasadeva. For those who have faith in the acharyas and in the traditional understanding of Madhva's position and all the acharyas' position, that in itself constitutes sufficient evidence. However, there are persons who lack faith in the transcendental method of receiving revealed knowledge. It is for this reason that Madvacharya also demonstrates careful textual consideration in composing his Mahabharata Tatparya Nirnay. Thereby, he addresses readers on multiple levels. Mundane scholars do not approach Shastra with transcendental faith, obviously, but they need external or academic forms of verification, such as comparing manuscripts from different regions. Regarding such persons, Srila Prabhupada wrote in a letter to Satswarup on the 17th of April, 1977, "Yes, that is our aim, to destroy the position of the mundane scholars. Mundane scholars are called adhyakshit, which means simply sense perceivers, no realization. Stick to your principles and be Krishna conscious. We have to prove to the world that anyone who is not Krishna conscious is a dushkritina and mudha." So, following in the footsteps of Madvacharya, we will examine this issue from the standpoint of manuscript comparison also. Not because we consider manuscript analysis to be our primary authority, but in order to address arguments made on that basis and to show what the evidence actually indicates even within that framework. I will first present the conclusion briefly. Then I will display all 31 groups of manuscripts, along with their translations, on the screen for most of this video. Finally, I will respond to a few further possible objections. First, an overview of what manuscript groups are and how they are used in the academic field to create a critical edition. The only complete critical edition of the Mahabharata is that which is prepared by the Bhandarka Oriental Research Institute in Pune. It's commonly known as the BORI or Bori Critical Edition. A critical edition of a text is produced by carefully comparing all the available manuscripts, examining each word of each verse in each manuscript, and systematically recording every little difference. The differences are listed in detailed footnotes known as the critical apparatus. For the Mahabharata, the Bori critical edition was prepared using 1,259 manuscripts collected from different parts of India. It took over 48 years, starting in 1919, and was completed in 1966. For the Sabha Parva, where the incident of Draupadi's disrobing occurs, scholars identified more than 100 manuscripts. These manuscripts were grouped into about 30 groups based on close similarity in their readings. From each group, one representative manuscript was chosen to help prepare what is known as the critical edition. In creating the critical edition, scholars painstakingly compared all these manuscript groups. Verses that appeared in the largest number of groups were placed in the main text, printed in larger font. Other verses were not rejected. They were included in the proper sequence, but printed in a smaller fonts. In other words, not a single verse found in the manuscript tradition was simply omitted. In a critical edition, each verse is accompanied by detailed notes. That's the critical apparatus at the bottom of the page. These notes tell us which manuscripts do not contain the verse and they also record even minute differences in wording among the manuscripts that do include it. Apart from the Bori critical edition, there is the Madhva Sampradaya's critical edition of the Mahabharata, published by Palimaru Mart, Udupi, and prepared by the late Acharya Sheshgiri Rao of Mysuru, following the traditional methodology for producing critical editions of Shastras. So remember that we are responding to HDG stating,
in the Bhagavatam, the offense to Draupadi in the gambling hall, the duty sabha, is mentioned several times, and each time it says the offense was touching her hair. Not a word about trying to strip her, nothing about that. And even in the Mahabharata, a very, very strong majority, almost all the existing manuscripts, surviving manuscripts, don't mention that Krishna gave her cloth.
So we have 30 manuscripts examined in the Bori edition, plus that prepared by the Madhva Sampradaya, and 31 out of 31 groups of manuscripts describe the attempted disrobing of Draupadi, which HDG doubts. 28 out of 31 groups of manuscripts record Draupadi's prayers to Krishna. 31 out of 31 groups state that unlimited length of wondrous colorful cloth was miraculously supplied to cover Draupadi. 30 out of 31 groups mention that a heap of cloth accumulated in the assembly and that Dushasana, exhausted, eventually gave up and sat down. Even though not directly stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, of course we only have a limited edition of Bhagavatam because, as Jiva Goswami states in the Higher Planets, there's a much bigger edition, but all the Mahabharata manuscripts attest to an attempted disrobing of Draupadi. Let us now turn to the manuscripts and see what they say. So the conclusion is clear. Dushasana attempted to disrobe Draupadi. She prayed to Krishna. Krishna appeared unseen by others and supplied her with an unlimited length of wondrous, colorful cloth. Heaps of cloth accumulated in the assembly, and exhausted, Dushasana abandoned his attempt and sat down. If HDG was not aware of all these manuscripts, then even by academic standards, his scholarship could be considered sloppy at best, given that he claimed that almost all the surviving manuscripts do not mention that Krishna gave her cloth. However, we may assume that HDG, by the grace of modern academia, was aware of all these manuscripts, yet he chose to ignore the obvious conclusion that emerges from them, namely, that there was an attempted disrobing of Draupadi. This conclusion is fully consistent with the statements of all previous acharyas of every sampradaya, as we established in the last video. Back to HDG's claim that a very strong majority, almost all the surviving manuscripts, do not mention that Krishna gave her cloth. This is incorrect. 33% of the manuscripts explicitly state that Krishna came and gave her cloth. But even in the manuscripts that do not explicitly state this, the logical conclusion is obvious, as you may have already noticed, because when Dushasana began attempting to disrobe her, Draupadi, in great distress, fervently prayed to Krishna, and immediately thereafter, the manuscripts describe, the miraculous manifestation of heaps of wonderful cloth began. And the natural question arises, where did the cloth come from? Who supplied it? Later in the Mahabharata's Udyog Parva, Krishna himself tells Draupadi that the prayers she offered while distressed in the assembly constitute a debt that he must repay by destroying the Kauravas. The sequence is clear. Draupadi prayed. Krishna heard those prayers, and unlimited cloth manifested. The logical conclusion is that Krishna supplied the cloth. Indeed, 10 manuscript groups, including versions associated with Madvacharya, state this explicitly. Furthermore, all acharyas, including the testimony of the Srimad Bhagavatam, accept that Draupadi prayed to Krishna and that Krishna saved her in the assembly. We have Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 8, Text 24, commentary by Jiva Goswami, Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, Text 10, Shukadeva Acharya of the Nimbaka Sampradaya, Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 15, Text 10, Vallabhacharya, Brihad Bhagavatamrta, 1.539, Sanatana Goswami, Chaitanya Bhagavat, Madhya, Chapter 10, Text 64 to 66, with commentary by Srila Bhaktistan Saraswati Thakur, Chaitanya Bhagavat until Khanda, Chapter 1, Text 256, commentary by Srila Bhaktistan Saraswati Thakur, and so on, as demonstrated in the previous videos on this topic. Therefore, even when certain Mahabharata recensions do not explicitly state who supplied the cloth, the traditional method of interpretation is to consult other shastras that describe the same incident. Anuktam anyato grahyam. What is not stated in one place should be understood from another authoritative source. When we turn to the Bhagavatam, it clearly states that Krishna protected Draupadi. Thus, the complete picture becomes evident. This is how the acharyas approach Shastra, understanding all Shastras as interconnected. Sridhar Swami, Vangshidhar Acharya, and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in their commentaries on Bhagavatam 1.8.6, and Veera Raghava Acharya in his commentary on Bhagavatam 1.8.24, mention that all these descriptions are summarized here in Bhagavatam. They are given in detail in the Mahabharata. That is why in their commentaries on the Bhagavatam, the acharyas direct readers to the Mahabharata for the detailed narration of Draupadi's disrobing. However, HDG does not follow this traditional methodology. Instead, he treats each shastra in isolation, refusing to allow one text to illuminate another. By doing so, he effectively severs the natural interconnections between the shastras, between the scriptures. HDG seems to have imbibed this methodology from his training in Harvard, so when he interprets the Bhagavatam, he refuses to allow other shastras or acharyas' commentaries to clarify or challenge his interpretation. From the traditional perspective, this approach ultimately reflects a deeper problem, the rejection of the integrated authority of Shastra seen through the commentarial tradition. I plan to analyze the root of the problem in another video.